There you go. Hey everybody, this is Matthew Orr from Wet Ink Games, and today I'm joined by Crystal Mazur, and she is a teacher, and she's also a role-playing game writer. She's written for Chicago by Night, Bionic's Path, Snowhaven for High Level Games. She's also the line developer for the PIP system primers from Third Eye Games. She's also a podcaster on Darker Days Radio. And she's also written for Never Going Home. So welcome, Crystal.
Hello.
All right, Crystal, we're going to start with some questions about like where you stand in the industry, right? Like take these important stands, right? So I'm going to ask you, is it Breakfast Club or 16 Candles?
Oh, Breakfast Club. Totally. That's not even an argument.
All right. Janus versus Grover. Who are you for? Janus the Muppet from Electric Mayhem or Grover from Sesame Street?
I'm going to have to say Janus because every time the Electric Mayhem came on the screen, I got super excited.
It's good. They're all right. The Vampire Dracula or the Vampire Lestat?
Lestat.
Why? Okay, so here's the other side of the spectrum then.
Yes.
Twilight or Underworld?
Oh. Okay, so I actually like Underworld better than Twilight. However, I am not a Twilight hater. I will put that out there.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. So then the last one then, let me ask you about a Sansevieria or a Pothos.
Oh, I'd have to go with the Pothos.
All right, excellent. That's a good one. I like the little dangly bits. It's great. Cool. Okay, so now that we've established where Crystal Mazur stands on these pressing issues of the day, I want to ask you, because you do, any of the writers, at this point, you talked about your credits, you talked about these questions about vampires, so a lot of your work has been in the sort of horror RPG space, and so I'm really curious how you kind of approach that, like, because horror isn't necessarily my favorite or first love, but I know it is some people's. So, like, how do you approach being a writer? Of that kind of stuff? Is it always about? Well, I don't know. Don't let me lead you. Just how do you make stuff that's horrible? Like, how do you do that?
My brain goes to wondrous places when I write horror usually. I grew up, I worked at a haunted house for 17 years.
Oh my. Okay.
And I got really good at scaring people. And it wasn't even like the jump scares. It was just how I moved my body, how I used my voice, even like learning personal space and when to move closer to somebody or step back away. Like if I got pretty good at not getting punched in the face. It did happen a couple times, but that's because I was wearing a mask and couldn't see very well. So, but there are subtle nuances in horror that I think I love to draw upon, and it's there's a suspense. I love suspense. Anything where if it's holding on to a discordant chord in music in my background of my head, because I also write to music, I love to stay there and hold that, because the longer you hold that suspense, the more on edge someone is. And I like body horror to a point. So anything that's grotesque or odd, or even using the body in odd ways that may not actually be horror, but might be horrifying for people to see, is something that I I enjoy tapping into occasionally. I don't like to use it a ton because not a lot of people like body horror. So I don't like to I'm not one to overuse certain tropes of horror. I like to splatter a whole bunch of different things about because that's what horror is about.
Sure.
So and not showing everything up front. Like keeping things behind a certain curtain until it's right at that right moment for it to be revealed.
All right, that's all pretty good. I like those. Those are good. Three easy methods there, and I like that. And I guess the thing I was thinking about earlier, asking, kind of drilling down a little bit, is is it about kind of inverting something, an expectation, like you talked about the body moving in odd ways? Is it how important is that element? Taking something that's totally expected and then turning it, how much do you turn it, right? Is it creepier to turn it 4 degrees off, or is it creepier to turn it 60 degrees off? You know what I'm asking?
Oh yeah. It depends on what you're writing. And it depends on how impactful you want that moment or that character to be. If you just want them to be unnerving, you just take, and I love taking tropes and breaking them. The lawful good necromancer is always one of my favorites. Wrap your head around that one.
Yeah,
I've seen it work. It's really great.
Sure. I can see it.
But taking, if it's something that you just want it to be odd or unnerving, you take it just a little bit. You take the dial and you turn it from 1 to a 3. So it's unnerving. It's definitely noticeably different than the norm, but it's not anything that you would necessarily equate to being horror. And I actually love doing that and making it a red herring, so to speak, where no, that person actually has no idea what's going on, is not involved in the plot at all, but because he's creepy, you guys automatically just assumed he's part of it.
Sure. That's
or
good.
they, or she, or it, depending on the creature.
Right.
And then for the larger moments and the moments you want to be most impactful or character changing or character driving would be the ones where you dial it up. And I have never actually dialed anything up to 100 yet. I'm very curious about doing that at some point, but I would definitely need to have an editor that is also sensitivity reader. Because I am also very conscious about how people perceive horror and the different types of horror, and I don't want to write anything outright where I'm like, nope, this is going to be offensive because it's horror, and that's not me, and
right.
that's not what I'd want to put out in the world.
Right. Yeah, just I guess the difference between upsetting and horror is lost on some people, perhaps.
I think it gets a little convoluted in a lot of discussions, because I'm also a huge advocate for safety mechanics, especially in horror. And I don't feel as a GM, as someone who would be running a horror game, that safety mechanics at all take away anything that I would want to do or tell at the table. I can still tell a horrific game, and I have, sometimes by accident, by having those boundaries in place, because I know where to push, because I know what my limits are. And within that, when you have a wall, people forget that you still have room. You still have a room to work in, and that room is pretty large.
That's good. That's a good way to think of it. That's good. Oh, okay. Thanks for all your answers and insight there. Having broached the subject of horror, you have written horror set in a particular climate, in particular time and place for the newest campaign dossiers for Never Going Home. So the what were Blood on the Snow, the Russia-focused campaign dossier. You are the lead writer for that, so you've written a bunch of half of the adventures, some of the other material in the book there. So what can you tell us about your process there, and how it may relate to what you just talked about, or like anything else cool you want to tell us about the book in general?
So whenever I write for something, and I've done this for every single thing that I've written for, I draw upon some personal experience of mine,
Okay.
or some personal connection. Like with the base book, it was my grandfather. He served in World War II, but his favorite poem was In Flanders Field. So I drew upon that heavily when I was writing, as just to get into the mind frame. With Blood on the Snow, I taught a little girl, and when she was one of my students, she only spoke Russian, and her mother was from Russia, and would tell me the folk tales that she would tell her daughters. She had 2 daughters at the time, and that I kind of pulled at that and took a look at what she was telling me and the stories that she was saying. And I have no personal connection with Russia, so that was my draw to, it was through Russian folktale. And I incorporated that into a couple of my scenarios, because I feel like folktales get the feeling of being in that country. And so I read a whole bunch of children's folktales, both the newer ones and like the older ones, because older Russian folktale, very different from modern day.
Sure.
Even if they're the same story,
Sure.
they are not the same story.
Right. That's yeah. I quite imagine that the 21st century collection is, even if it is telling the same story, that it's been a big 100 years over there in
Yep. Yeah. And so, digging up the older ones definitely gave the feel of what I was trying to go for. So I drew heavily upon that because I love folktales. I love children's stories. I love fairy tales. I love all of that stuff. So I drew heavily on that while writing.
That's neat. That's cool that you had that shape connection there. So do you want to say anything specific about the adventures or the other stuff that's in the book, or you just want to I don't know. We don't have to worry too much about like spoilers, like people are, I don't know, we don't want to spoil the ending, right? But like you can talk something about it if you want, like
okay,
kind of what kind of what the through line is, like what the kind of the story overall will be as the players play through it.
Yeah, so the story overall has to deal with the Russian Revolution and some of the events that lead up to it, and the characters actually get to immerse themselves in a lot of the heavy players within that. And one of the biggest ones and one of the coolest ones that I had so much fun writing was Rasputin.
Sure.
And coming up with how he is different in Never Going Home, because Never Going Home is history, is World War I, but it's an alternative history. Right. So getting to kind of take who he was and adapt it for that setting was really, really cool. And playing out a story with him and trying to guess how the characters would react to him was both challenging but also a lot of fun, because you're like, oh, well, you could interact with him this way or this way, and then you'd like branch off into like 3 other ways, and you're like, okay, no, we got to pull it back, because otherwise this is going to be like a 5,000 word section and doesn't need to be.
right and that speaking of which, that's actually maybe a good project somewhere else, like a choose your own adventure, multiple branching paths
I have been
thing.
trying to figure out how to do something like that in my head for like the past 2 years. Eventually, I'm going to have to get it out. I'm going to have to like pull a string and just put it somewhere to either work on it or pitch it to somebody to do or something.
Well, maybe I'm gonna write that down, a little note right here. There's a lot of potential there. So, Crystal, tell us. So, this is great. Like, your work on this is almost done. The dossiers are almost complete. So, what else is going on with you and gaming, or what other projects are you involved in? Like, maybe you've had a great quarantines accomplishment that, you know, I don't know what's going on. What else is going on with you? Anything else you want to promote or talk about?
I mean, gaming wise, I run a weekly D&D 5th ed game that is a homebrew setting for myself. And so I'm having fun breaking rules for that because I wanted to play Pugmire and everybody else wanted to play D&D. So we're playing D&D and then I'm throwing them into Pugmire at some point in the Chronicle. They've actually already went to Pugmire. We're actually going to other settings in the storyline. So I'm using them as a travel point. So it's pretty cool. It won't be so cool when they get to Ravenloft, but
well, right, Ravenloft is no one has any fun in Barovia.
No.
Were you inspired by? I recently heard your interview with Steffi Devon, and she was talking about the nexus between worlds and the way that she structured legend lore. Was that the project that she was
legend lore? Yep.
So, like, were you inspired by that? And like, well, we could go to whatever world we want. Like,
well, okay.
Pugmire today, Ravenloft next week.
So no, I've been running this campaign for 3 years.
Okay.
So this was actually before Legend Lore was actually conceptualized, and they bought the license and started writing for it. But I was heavily inspired by the Labyrinth, actually.
Okay.
That is one of my all-time favorite films, and if you ever ask me what my favorite movie is, it will always be The Labyrinth. So I never answer The Labyrinth because everybody always knows the answer. So I always say something else because I have a list of stuff that I like. It's generally all fantasy. But The Labyrinth, just assume that that's going to be my go-to answer, and I'm going to give you something else to work with.
Yeah, I suspected that. You did. I didn't ask about The Labyrinth. I do know that about you, but that's what you think.
So gaming wise, I've been running that. We kind of took a little hiatus in July because I've been finishing up a whole bunch of projects and starting a whole bunch of new projects, as well as interviewing for teaching positions and getting ready for school year and stuff like that. So it's just a little crazy July for me. But we just finished up the final dev sections for Kids Guide to Monster Hunting, which is going to be the next PIP system book.
All right.
And it is Kids Hunt Monsters.
Kids Hunt Monsters. It's in the title.
And it's literally going to be a guide. It's going to be like the Boy Scout guide, except for as a monster hunting kit.
All right, that sounds.
And there's
cool.
going to be pages for you to be able to draw stuff in, write stuff down. It's going to be like an actual physical compendium that you can build upon for when you write your chronicle. And
is this aimed at? I know Pip skews a little younger, I feel like, or it skews all ages. So is this like you as adult players can play as the monster hunting children, or is this like encouraged to be like, I don't know, you're fourth grade, the fourth graders who are playing this are hunting monsters? So yes and no. Okay, that's perfect.
It is skewed towards the lower kids. It's not lower, but younger kids. However, when I've play tested it and when Aloy's play tested it, we've had adults playing who absolutely loved it as well. And you can actually play, we wrote it so you can actually play up to teenagers. So it could actually be similar to Monster Hearts 2. if you wanted to do something like that, that's a little more on the adult edge of a game. But you can do something similar where you're middle schoolers or even like freshmen in high school playing the game if you wanted to. But a lot of parents have enjoyed playing it with their kids. And in the game, we actually talk about like self-care and mental health care for kids specifically, because a lot of people have the assumption that kids don't feel stress or kids don't feel worried or overwhelmed or anything like that. And that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
So we actually do have little snippets in there of how kids can create their own self-care in the game, but also by themselves. Like we actually break the fourth wall at one point and say, if this is too much, take a break, go be with friends, go read a book, go watch TV, go play video game, something like that, something that you choose to do on your own. And then come back to this later when you feel better.
That's great. That all sounds really great.
And then a couple other things I can't talk about. So
secrets.
Yes.
Okay.
So well, yeah, NDAs are a thing. So
sure. Well, that I'm going to take that as that's good, because usually NDAs mean that you've got like somebody who's really, it's a valuable property that they want to protect, which means that's good. That's like it's good to get those big jobs. I like it. Okay. So anything else? So I think we're ready to do this pitchorama if you're ready. the 5-minute pitchorama. We've done.
All right. I've been practicing this with my interactive statuses, so.
Oh, okay, cool. Right. So I'm going to start us off, and hopefully you can pick up some of the same stuff that I've got ready to throw down. Okay. All right. So The Rescuers and The Rescuers Down Under, right? Those movies?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I want the Rescue Aid Society, except everyone's bats.
Oh, that's okay.
Right. So what would this game look like if we've got the Rescue Aid Society, except they're all bats instead of mice? Like, what is this game gonna be?
Okay. So I am going to say that the Rescue Aid Society for bats is going to be more about, let's see here. They are going to be about helping other animals that get lost at night from larger predators.
Okay.
So, however, the bats are perceived to be these like graceful flying beings.
Oh yeah.
In the air, and they're not.
All
they're
right.
they're literally like super balls bouncing down the hallway, where they just keep bouncing into things and then just veering off.
Okay.
So they have to work in groups of, like maybe 5 or 6, because they have a tendency to get lost or veer off course. So somebody has to keep everybody on track.
So this is, you're pulling some baddie from Fern Gully vibes, it sounds
basically,
like.
Yeah.
And then, so do we want to, would there be an element to the game where there's sort of like a, not faction necessarily, but like you've got like the microbats, the insect eating bats, and then you've got like the very large fruit eating bats from like different parts, that they ranges overlap, but like there's definitely these two very different groups of bats. Like, would that
I would say they would specialize. So like the insect bats, which tend to be medium size, would help the smaller type of bats or smaller type of animals. So like mice, chipmunks, like rodents and stuff like that, stuff that they wouldn't have any interest in eating. All right.
Right.
The fruit bats would help the larger animals, so like raccoons or possums, and like even like dogs and stuff like that. They're large enough to be able to
some of them are
almost human sized.
Yeah, 3 or 4 3 or 4 feet tall. It's a big bat.
3 or 4 feet with a 6-foot wingspan. Yep.
Right. Okay. So if we've got these like, so here's the thing, like the next thing that I think of, the Rescue Aid Society, they were like kind of like, I mean, they were kind of like the UN, like nobody could really turn down their help or anything like that. But like, if these bats are like sort of clumsiness is sort of like an aspect of the game, then like, is this sort of like how willingly is the assistance accepted? Like, is that going to be an element of the game where
I would say
like,
it'd be more like the A team.
the A team?
They get hired.
Okay, they get hired.
They get hired to do the jobs that nobody else wants to do.
All right. So like so then like, is it like, I mean, like, how would that factor into the gameplay though? If they're almost like, I'm imagining like like sort of like not high value targets, because that would be valuable, but like, you know, somebody's run away or gone missing, and then so like nobody's really, you know, like a lost, you know, almost like an Amber Alert type situation where it's like, I mean, I guess that's what the Rescue Aid Society was doing too, but like the you know, something that wasn't, there was no like, if you're like the daughter of a billionaire, then like that person's going to put up a giant reward. But if you're just some kid from the street, not necessarily, the motivation isn't there. So that's where the bats come in. But then there's sort of like, what kid wants to be helped by the bats? Like, it's sort of like, I don't know, do you have to convince the person to let you save them, or like, I don't know.
Ooh, that's really funny. I would say that they would not be taking high profile cases, because the high profile cases are going to be taken by the other animals that other people trust more. And, you know, like they're trying to work their way up the social ladder and not be seen as pariahs, you know, not be seen as the baddies or whatever the case may be. Baddies.
Right.
There's a play on words right there.
I don't know why. Okay, there we go. Stop. So, all right, we did it. 5 minutes, some fun pitch on a possible game. You know, coming soon from somebody. Coming soon from Wedding Games or Third Eye. Maybe you'll see it in the new. It'll be the new Pip.
We are launching Pip Worlds this August, so, and that's going to be our community content for Pip system. So,
all right. So
maybe I'll write a bad adventure.
Write a bad adventure. All right. So thank you so much, Crystal, for chatting with me and being part of this virtual GenCon promotion. And, you know, until we can all get back together and give each other hugs in real life, virtual hugs to you.
So many hugs. So many hugs.
So many hugs missing. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching this coverage. And we're stay tuned for more of our GenCon coverage. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys. Bye.
Say goodbye.